Yeah, I would say life in Mississippi, the two words I would use to describe it is hospitality. People are very hospitable and relaxed. One of my favorite things to do was you'd be out walking the streets and there's like 50 people on one given street all sitting out on their porch enjoying a cold drink, just kind of sitting there relaxing, which you don't see often in other parts of the United States, I think, especially in the kind of the hustle and bustle of things. But very relaxed, people always offering us a drink. They would always say, y'all want a Coke? And we'd be like, oh, well, I don't mind Coke. That sounds good. And they bring out like another type of soda they called Coke. They called soda Coke. So that was kind of fun. I think that they're very welcoming. That kind of captures that Coke story. Weather in Mississippi is very hot. There's about 1 month out of the year where it's cold, and it gets really cold because the humidity kind of bites you, and that's usually January-ish, I remember. But August, July through about September, and especially August, are super hot. I remember being out knocking doors, and I remember particularly a lady opened the door and she was like, "What are y'all doing out here? It's 113. There's a heat warning out." And we were like, "Oh, we didn't know. We're sweating to death, but we didn't know that like we're not supposed to be outside because it's so hot." But I mean, sometimes we'd change shirts at lunch just because our shirts would get super gross. But it's definitely very hot and humid. We generally had a rule that we wore suits from conference to conference, and then if it was above 75 degrees, we could also not wear suits. So usually about beginning of March, we'd actually ditch our suits because it would be above 75 from March on most of the time. You know, there's sometimes some cooler spells in there, but I found that to be interesting. Wildlife in Mississippi, there's a lot of different things. I remember I was on the coast in a town called Waveland, and we went by this kind of pond and looked in the pond, and there's about 5 gators in there, which was super cool. So I took a bunch of pictures of those. They're just kind of bathing in the sun. That was interesting. There's a lot of deer. A common thing is to see a bunch of armadillos on the road, which is kind of funny. We have pictures of armadillos with like a beer can. Someone, I guess, saw the dead armadillo, went and put a beer can on it. So we have pictures of stuff like that. A lot of cockroaches. We always had to keep things in our house to try to get rid of cockroaches. Yeah, I would say cost of living is definitely a little bit lower, not a ton lower though. I felt like it's pretty comparable to here in Utah. I remember there was a couple areas where we had to look around at apartments, and if I remember right, they were cheaper than trying to find an apartment in Provo, at least. I want to say between $200 and $300 a month for like a 1 or 2 bedroom place. But that kind of depended. That was $200 or $300 per person, so $400 to $600, I guess, would probably be a better estimate. But yeah, that's about all I had as far as that goes. Groceries seemed about the same, maybe a little bit lower. Milk wasn't quite as expensive there, but relatively pretty close, I would say. So transportation, I felt like is pretty similar to, I'm from Utah, pretty similar to Utah. You know, there's highways, just a lot of people take cars. I didn't see a lot of buses. We personally, as missionaries, most of us had cars, and we had limited miles though, so a lot of us had bikes where if we had an appointment that was close by, we'd bike, or we'd have bike racks on our cars. We could drive to an area and then bike around kind of for 2 or 3 hours doing work. But the people in Mississippi in general, most of them had cars. If not, then people would carpool or whatnot. As far as work goes, there's kind of the upper class and the lower class of Mississippi, and it sometimes is really apparent. You could be in a neighborhood and it was a very lower class neighborhood. Some people call it the ghetto, but it was just very apparent that these people either didn't have jobs or were working hard at very low paying jobs. And then there was also the other side. Madison, Mississippi is one of the richest cities in Mississippi, where people are doctors doctors or people in financial markets. I know a lot of people that worked for a gas company that was very prominent down there. But there was kind of that high divide. Obviously, there's a middle class too, but in the areas I served, there was a very apparent drive into a neighborhood, and you kind of know what this neighborhood is like. As far as diversity goes, generally the South is known for having a lot of black people, and there was definitely a lot of black people. I would say about half and half in the areas I served in the wards. There's one branch in particular in Jackson, though, that's essentially an all-black branch. It was very fun to go to, actually. They still kind of have some of their Baptist traditions. We'd sing some Baptist songs. I remember we sang Wade in the Water one time when we were there. We went to the Christmas party for that branch once, and it was just a blast. They just had so much fun, and it is definitely a different culture there, which was interesting. But I really liked it. I loved people on all sides of the spectrum in Mississippi. I loved being there with people in kind of the lower class neighborhoods as well as the upper class neighborhoods. Felt like I could relate with them, get along well. But there definitely was a high degree of diversity within the areas I served, I felt like.